Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore. On Friday, President-elect Donald Trump spoke with Taiwan's President, Tsai Ing-wen, who, according to Trump, had offered her congratulations on his election. Trump is believed to be the first president or president-elect to speak with a Taiwanese leader since 1979, when the United States cut ties with Taiwan. Most of the world respects the One China policy, meaning respecting China's claim to Taiwan. Since Nixon, the U.S. has dealt only with the People's Republic of China and not dealt directly with the government of Taiwan, even though it carries on trade relations directly with Taiwan and formally considers Taiwan's status as unsettled. Well, over the weekend, Trump tweeted, "Did China ask us if it was okay to devalue their currency, making it harder for our companies to compete, heavily tax our products going into their country, the U.S. doesn't tax them, or to build a massive military complex in the middle of the South China Sea? I don't think so," said Trump. Well, with a $336 billion U.S. net trade deficit with China in 2015, many are wondering what a Trump presidency will mean for economic and political relations with China. Here to talk about all of this with us and joining us from Baltimore is Ho-Fung Hung. He's an associate professor at Johns Hopkins University in the sociology department, and his scholarly interest includes global political economy, protest, nation-state formation, social theory, with a focus on East Asia. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks. How are you doing?
So first of all, what do you make of Trump's objections? Are some of these critiques of the Chinese-American relationship valid?
His critique of Chinese behavior regarding U.S.-China relations, if we talk about the details, there's some inaccuracy there. For example, he complains about China's deliberate devaluation of the currency to hurt American enterprises. But in fact, over the last 2 years or so, China actually has been facing a problem of capital outflow, capital flight, that led to a devaluation of the currency that the Chinese government doesn't want to see. So actually, the intervention by the Chinese central bank in terms of the currency movement is to push up the currency. That Chinese government doesn't want the renminbi to devalue that fast. So Trump's accusation that China is intervening to push down the currency is not accurate.
And I assume China wants their currency to increase in value because it makes commodities far more expensive for China, and China is a major investor all over the world. So you would think they do want a stronger currency. It strengthens their hand in purchasing.
And I think that the Chinese government right now, the concern is that to stem the outflow of capital, that because many people who have money are trying to smuggle money and in different ways out of China. And if the currency continue to devalue rapidly, and then more people will get the money out, and then it is the fear that China is doing it with right now. So to say the Chinese government is intervening to depreciate the currency is not quite accurate. But many other, but the sentiments among the American business communities toward China is moving toward the negative. That Trump is right about that part, because even before the election, over the last 3-4 years, there's more and more American enterprises doing business in China has been complaining that the regulators in China and the state enterprise in China are treating them unfairly because the Chinese economy is slowing down, and so the Chinese government is trying to use a lot of extra economic measures to outcompete, to let the state enterprises to outcompete the American enterprises, other foreign enterprises. So there's a lot of complaint. So that part of the spirit regarding U.S.-China economic relation is quite right.
And is he right about the issue that China taxes American products but not the other way around?
This is controversial, that because over the years that U.S. and China has been taking these kind of trade issues to the WTO, and some of them has not yet been settled, because U.S. has been, even the Obama administration has been having issues with China regarding the dumping, that accusing China is dumping certain kind of products like steel and tire to the U.S. market and so on and so forth. But it is very complicated issues that it is difficult to say it in the simply black and white manner.
Now, if I'm in the leadership in China, I'm thinking to myself, If this represents where American politics is going, and American political leadership is going to be so unreliable in terms of the traditional way the United States and China deal with each other, in other words, if Trump is really serious about what might amount to a trade war, and also geopolitically, the kind of people Trump is gathering around himself are very intent on regime change in Iran, and they're on the far right wing of American geopolitical thinking. If I'm in a Chinese leadership, I'm thinking to myself, well, we got a lot of eggs in this American economic basket. We own a ton of American debt. A lot of our economy is based on exporting, providing cheap labor for exports to the United States. Am I thinking about ways to decouple China more, and perhaps in a more rapid pace than I might otherwise, from the American economy?
In terms of decoupling, I think anyway, it is happening, or it has been happening already, because of the slowdown in the Chinese economy and the rising wage of Chinese labor, and also the increasingly tough environment for American business in China because of the regulatory discrimination against foreign enterprises. So, for example, the American Chamber of Commerce in China has published a survey of American business in China earlier this year, 2016, and found that actually in quite a large number of American business already consider leaving China. After they leave China, they might go to Southeast Asia and other low-cost countries, and some might go to Mexico, or some might go back to the U.S. And many of them are citing this kind of a harsh regulatory environment and the slowdown and the increasing wage in China. So this kind of a honeymoon period of U.S.-China economic relation has been ending anyway, with or without Trump. So it is the big environment. And whether the Trump action will trigger a trade war with China, I'm not that sure. And actually, I'm not that worried about it, because China will be very cautious about whether it wage a trade war with the U.S. also. That on the one hand, a lot of American enterprise like Apple and many big business has interest in China, but also China also still depend a lot on American markets and American capital. So you look at the Beijing's response to Trump phone call to Taiwan in the official media, you already sense that the Chinese government is trying to put the blame on the Chinese leader. On the Taiwan leader, rather than Trump, and then they try to portray Trump as an inexperienced politician that is kind of played by kind of a cunning Taiwan leader. So they are very cautious not to put all the blame on the Trump as a president-elect.
American geopolitical thinking has always had, and most of it has always had, a long-term prospect that in the final analysis, the power that the United States is going to have to contend with is China. Frankly, if I understand it correctly, really more so than Russia. Certainly China's economy is bigger. We had Obama's Asian pivot, which amounts to a strategy for a kind of encirclement of China. And there's been various, there used to be a group in Washington called the Blue Group. I mean, it may still be around, but their idea was that every geopolitical decision the United States makes should work back from the idea that eventually there's going to be some out-and-out confrontation with China. How much does that play into Chinese thinking? And as I say again, with the level of aggressive rhetoric coming from Trump, does it make them more concerned about this?
It's quite ironic that during the election, or before the election, I observed that many Chinese commentators and Chinese official media, they are actually quite worried that Hillary Clinton will be elected, because of the Obama pivot to Asia actually is formulated when Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State. So they see Hillary Clinton as a kind of a hawkish foreign policy person, so they think that this kind of pivot to Asia will continue to escalate if Clinton get elected, while they see Trump as an isolationist that will leave Taiwan to China and then get out of the Western Pacific. But it turns out it is not the case, and it is quite ironic. And as it emerged today that the Wall Street Journal has a report this morning saying that actually the Trump-Tsai Ing-wen call was not a kind of a impulsive act, but it was actually orchestrated by some old China policy hand in the Republican Party, namely the Bob Dole, that actually he pulled the string and make the phone call possible. So it reflects actually quite a kind of a sentiments in the foreign policy communities in the Republican Party, and I believe in large quarter of the Democratic Party as well, that that U.S. leader will thinking about the Taiwan and Asia policy, because over the years that the assumption is that the U.S. has to be very sensitive, very careful, not to hurt China feeling, a lot to offend China, so that China will cooperate with the U.S. on the South China Sea and on North Korea. But as it turned out over the last few years, North Korea seems to have moved beyond China control. And recently that the U.S. government released the information that it gathered that actually the North Korea nuclear bomb development program has been getting assistance from some Chinese state-owned enterprises. So there's a China help behind it. And so it makes the Washington foreign policy circle quite frustrated about it. And also the South China Sea, even though the U.S. has been very careful not to provoke China, but China has been quite assertive. Even some will say that it is aggressive in building all this militarizing the South China Sea and raising alarms of China's neighbor. So there's already a thinking before the election that Washington should recalibrate its Asia policy, and particularly the Taiwan policy, and because Taiwan has been a very important part of U.S. strategies and defense positions in the Western Pacific. So this thing has been going on, and as it became clear this morning that actually this phone call between Trump and Tsai Ing-wen was not some ad hoc impulsive act, but there is some kind of a senior GOP foreign policy person involved in making it possible. So it seems to be signaling a deeper shift in Washington's Asia policy rather than just an impulsive act.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people had paid attention to this, it would have been clear this is where Trump was headed with his foreign policy. The non-interventionist talk, I think, was mostly window dressing. We've been saying on The Real News, the proof of Trump's pudding is in the appointments. And you can see the kind of people he's gathering around him. They're very, very hawkish and very interventionist.
Cons are back.
Let me just ask you finally, China has a fairly good relations, I understand, with Iran, and although they did not support the intervention in Iraq, they didn't do much to stop it. If there is a real move at the United Nations or outside the United Nations, it's very possible with this administration they won't even care about a United Nations resolution. If they really move towards some kind of attack on Iran, I don't know whether that would take the shape of bombing or much more serious sanctions plus some kind of military action. Is China likely to do anything, or can they do anything, or they would continue to sort of stay out of the way?
China, on record, China has not been a very active politician in the world stage. And you look at the U.S. And the UN resolution on the action in Libya a few years ago, you can see that. And originally, China is siding with Russia to oppose the U.S. and the Western countries, and in collaboration with a number of Arab countries, actions in Libya against the Gaddafi regimes. Because China has a lot of oil interests and investment with the Gaddafi government, but when they see the international environment is shifting to the way that it is inevitable and it's difficult to resist, and they will just abstain and don't get in the way. So China have been and starting to talk with the rebels at that time to protect its interests. So China has been quite practical and realistic, and let other big players like Russia to take the lead if they feel that it's necessary to oppose the U.S. action, but they are careful never to take the lead unless it is issues in its neighborhood, which is Asia.
And likely you think the same way on Iran then?
Should be, yeah.
Right. Okay, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll continue this following the story. We'll come back to talk to you soon.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.